This is the end of week number 3. This is day number 20. This is a preview of next week. This is Donna Wilson, Real Deal. She's going to be leading you next week, so get some rest after this because she's going to... Alrighty, it is time for the question of the day. And the question of the day today comes from Holly. And Holly's question is, when using controlled breathing during exercise, does the count 2 in, pause, then count to 4 slowly out rule change to a greater number count on inhale and exhale with greater demand during exercise? Okay. This is a good time for a math lesson, okay? So the thing is that everything that we talk about when it comes to activity, and it could be physical activity, it could also be mental activity, has a certain metabolic requirement to it. And we can think of that as supply and demand. So when we talk about breathing in for 2 and out for 4, the purpose behind that, and this relates more so to the obstructive patients like COPD patients, more so than the pulmonary fibrosis patients, but we don't want to put people in a box. I will say what I've always said, which is that you must find a breathing technique that is okay for you through experimentation, okay? So in for 2, out for 4. So the purpose is to take a breath in for 2 to make sure that your air gets past your trachea, because if you recall, I told you that the trachea is dead space, meaning that no air in the trachea can actually get to a spot where it can go into your bloodstream, okay? That's the case for breathing in for at least 2, okay? Breathing in for 1 is like, and it basically the air goes in your trachea or windpipe and out your trachea or windpipe. So it's not going to be very effective, okay? Now, there's something called minute volume, and minute volume has to do with how much air do you move over the course of a full minute, okay? This is the equivalent to cardiac output for your heart. So when we talk about minute volume, we're talking about your respiratory rate times your tidal volume. And the tidal volume is how much air do you take in and out with each breath. So in other words, if you have a tidal volume of 500 milliliters per minute, of 500 milliliters per breath, and you take 10 breaths per minute, well then that means that you're taking in 5,000 milliliters of air, or 5 liters per minute. The average person will breathe in and out approximately 6 liters of air per minute. So the importance of this is to think about the impact of respiratory rate and tidal volume, because those 6,000 milliliters can be divided in many different ways. So for example, if you're breathing at 12 breaths per minute, that means that you're taking in approximately 500 milliliters of air with each breath. Okay, now the significance of this is that the average person has to get past approximately the number of milliliters of their trachea as their weight in pounds. So for example, if you were a 150 pound person, that would mean your trachea would take up 150 milliliters of dead space. And as a result, anything above 150 milliliters of air will go into your lungs where it can be used. So for example, with our example of 12 breaths per minute, 500 milliliters per breath, if you're a 150 pound person, that means that of every breath, 350 milliliters of air is actually going into your airways. Now that I got that number by multiplying 12 breaths per minute times 500 milliliters per breath, and we're really only getting 350 milliliters per breath because 150 milliliters of that must pass our trachea, right? So let me see if I have my trachea here, and I do have my trachea here, okay? So imagine that this is 150 milliliters of air, but it's 150 milliliters of dead space that's not usable. So that means the first 150 milliliters that comes to here is dead space. Anything above that is gravy, okay? So then if we think about the person who's breathing 20 breaths per minute, what that means to get that same 6 liters of air, or that same 6,000 milliliters, is that they're taking 300 milliliters per breath, which means that 150 milliliters per breath gets cut off here, 150 milliliters per breath goes to the lungs where you can use it, okay? Now here's where things get complex. Imagine if you're breathing 40 breaths per minute, as people often do when they're in severe respiratory distress. That means you're breathing 150 milliliters per breath, and that means 150 milliliters come in, 150 milliliters come out, and that means we're going. And so is it any wonder when you're breathing so hard and so fast that your saturation is dropping and that you're feeling worse and worse and worse? It's no surprise, because hardly any of the air that you're actually breathing in is making it to a space where it has the ability to get into your bloodstream, okay? So there's that. So the idea is that we always want to try to breathe in for at least 2, because that in for 1 is not going to make it into your airways, or it will make it into your airways, but it's not going to make it into the conducting zone where you're going to be able to use it and use the oxygen that's associated with that air, okay? But the thing is that you may not have the control to be able to increase. So yeah, it sounds good that if the demand increases, right? And how do we increase the demand? The demand increases by increasing your walking speed, walking uphill, carrying a heavier weight, etc., 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 okay? But if the demand increases, you should still start out by breathing in for 2 and out for 4, and the ratio of in for 2 and out for 4 may be the same. So in other words, you may still be breathing in. So it may be like, for example, when we first start, it may be in, blow, 2, 3, 4. In, blow, 2, 3, 4. However, when the demand increases, as is the case of walking faster or walking uphill or climbing stairs, you may actually have to increase the rate of all of it. So you may have to go in, blow, 2, 3, 4. In, blow, 2, 3, 4. In, blow, 2, 3, 4. So the idea is that the ideal ratio is in for 2 and out for 4. And that's the closest to natural breathing as we can if our body did nothing, or if we did nothing to change what our body is supposed to do. So it's not like I could say necessarily in for 3, out for 6. Breathing in for 3, out for 6 as compared to in for 2, out for 4 would be more for a situation when you're feeling very, very comfortable or at rest, okay? It's typical that when we become more active, it's typical that when we are more in distress, that we either have to breathe shorter, that we have to breathe both shorter and faster, but the ideal would be to keep the ratio the same. So again, it may be like, as opposed to and again, everybody is different, every situation is different, but my goal is not to give you something to memorize so that when you're actually doing something, you have to be like, wait, what did that guy say again? No, think of the principles of in for 2, out for 4. If in for 2, out for 4 is too long for you, try to breathe in for 2, out for 3. If it's too short for you, try to breathe in for 2, out for 5. And if the inhalation is too short for you, then try to breathe in for a count of 3 and out for a count of 5 or 6. Again, don't get the idea that this stuff is set in stone, because it's not, okay? None of this is set in stone, and every patient is different. So guess what? I may want you to breathe in for, half as long as you blow out. I may want you to exhale for twice as long as you inhale, but that may not work for you, okay? That may not work for you, particularly with the restrictive disease patients, the patients who have the pulmonary fibrosis and other restrictive diseases. The difficulty is going to come in taking the deep breath. And so taking the deep breath is hard. The recoil of the lungs is there and is actually more powerful in many cases. So again, try the different patterns. So write the numbers 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 on the left side of a page, and write the numbers 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 on the right side of the page and try each one. Remember the scales that we did the other night. So try in for 2, out for 2, in for 2, out for 3, in for 2, out for 4, in for 2, out for 5. Now once you're going to go to 6 of exhalation, you should try in for 3, out for 6. In for 3, out for 5. In for 3, out for 4. In for 3, out for 3. And again, try to figure out what's most comfortable for you, recognizing the fact that no breathing pattern is going to be comfortable for everybody in all situations. So rather than try to memorize what works and what doesn't work, I would so much rather you be able to think on the spot and be able to say, you know what, I need to make an adjustment now. It feels like I'm not breathing in long enough, and to extend your inhalation. Or to make a judgment on the spot and say, you know what, it feels like I'm not getting all the air out of my lungs. Let me slow it down and exhale for a little bit longer. Always trying to keep as relaxed breathing as we can in all situations, okay? So I hope that answers your question. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.